Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the MAK, and welcome to Living in a Robot, how algorithms and robotic systems are changing architecture and the city. A panel discussion in relation to this year's Vienna Biennale and in relation to the beautiful exhibition here in the MAK. I will come to all the panelists in a second. But first I want to also kind of point out that the whole panel today and the discussion here today is in cooperation with the Federal Ministry of Science, Research and Economy, Bundesministerium für Wissenschaft, Forschung und Wirtschaft. My name is Andreas Rumpfhuber. I'm an architect and architectural theoretician based here in Vienna, and I have the honor to lead here this great evening and moderate this great round of experts today on the theme. Could we please change the slides? We have 6 people here, experts on the panel. First, there are Christina Chiardullo and Jeffrey Montes from the United States. Both somehow represent what you see here. Originally a competition entry for the NASA's habitat program for the Mars. It won the first prize and is a kind of quite intelligent 3D printed ice house. For me, their position kind of represent a techno-utopian position in this panel. Christina has a background in astronomy and philosophy before she entered architecture. Christina has worked, among others, at the New York City Planning Department, Foster & Partners, as well as the NASA Johnson Space Center. Her practice is concerned with spaceship Earth and with spaceships as such. She was involved in developing green guidelines for the New York City Planning Office, as well as the design of the 3D printed house that you see here. She's currently doing a PhD in New York and is taught in many universities, amongst others Columbia University. Jeffrey Montes. Jeffrey is a New York-based designer and founder of Jet Portal Space Formcraft. I think that's the collaborative that you did this thing? No. A design consultancy that works with NASA and private aerospace firms on habitation and exploration systems. In 2015, he co-authored the Mars Ice House, and he's now a practicing architect here not here, but in New York City. A second position, right on to my left, is Jasmina Tešanović, the ladies first, and Bruce Sterling. Both of them initiated also in 2015, I think. 2015, Casa Jasmina, yeah, 2 years ago. 2014, Casa Jasmina, a mixture, was to be a temporary 2 years project, and now is permanent, and is a space that you could imagine as a combination of a lab, a gallery, and a bed and breakfast. Jasmina, she's I think for me at least, a renowned feminist and political activist from the Balkans. She's writer, journalist, musician, translator, and film director. Already in 1978, she promoted the first feminist conference in Eastern Europe, in Belgrade. And she also designed and created the first feminist publishing house that ran for 10 years, I think, called Feminista 94. And she's author of Diary of Political Idiot. That was, I think, a blog entry on the Kosovo War. And she's one of the co-founders of Casa Jasmina. And then right to my left is Bruce Sterling, whom I guess everybody here in the room knows. He's a science fiction author. He has published around, I think, 12 novels and a sheer endless amount of short stories. Together with well-known authors like William Gibson, he defined the cyberpunk genre in the 1980s. I think one of the key publications for that was the Mirror Shaders anthology that Bruce edited. His engagement is but beyond writing, and he has an engagement in science, technology, and the built environment in a great time. For example, he initiated a collection of dead media projects, a collection of dead historic media technologies, but also initiated something you could call a bright green environmentalism that aims for a positive understanding of technology, change in convergence with social innovation for sustainable development. Then Rudolf Giffinger. He is a professor at the University of Technology in Vienna for, I think, smart cities it's called. He studied geography and specialized in regional science. He is teaching theory and methods of urban and regional development and corresponding policies in the local, European and the global contexts. So he used to do research in Europe, but also in Latin America. And more recently, his research activities are focusing on the positioning of cities in Europe or global networks, urban competitiveness, polycentricity and metropolitization, as well as on place-based smart city-urban strategies. Alexander Reben, last not but least, he's an artist, I would say. I would call him like this. His works deals with human-machine relationships, synthetic psychology, artificial philosophy, and robotic ethics, amongst other topics. He uses art as an experiment. His work allows for the viewer to experience the future within the metaphorical contexts. His artwork and research has been shown and published internationally, and his consults many major firms. He has a piece in the exhibition here, but also is exhibiting at the moment at the Ars Electronica and many other festivals. And it's really, really like the whole day today, quite loud. We come to these things later on when the people speak. From my point of view, living in a robot, it might be, in a German translation of the title, it's called Leben im Roboter. And Leben im Roboter means not only living, like dwelling in a robot, but living and working, like being in a robot. And thinking of the theme, of course, my research came into my mind that in a way there's a utopia that is as old as humanity when it comes to a relationship between humans and machines, and living with them and helping them out, and in many ways. But I think what we speak about today is something that is really something that came about and has an initial point of departure in the 1950s, 60s with the introduction of calculating machines, with the digital idea, with cybernetics, you could say the idea of counting, and in that respect, there are 3 projects that reminded me of that there was already in the 60s here in Austria, but also worldwide, of course, a movement that embraced that new dominant discourse on the digital, on the full automation, on that machines at one point will take over all our tedious work and all our work, and we will be living only, working only 20 hours or no longer working, you know, related to the utopia of the leisure society, you could say. In a way, something else happened for many of us. And one of these projects is, of course, Hans Hollein's university extension, where he is presenting television as something, so we don't need any buildings any longer, but he's presenting the television set as the medium for university education in the future. Kind of, I would call that then a remote controlled space that he's opening up with that. Then Haus Co. The Yellow Heart, das gelbe Herz. I brought sections and ground plan and two pictures of that. Still a mechanic machine, an automate that would where 2 people would be able to crawl into, and the machine, the bubble would inflate and vibrate, aiming the 2 that are in there, that they get rhythmized for the coming leisure society, but also kind of get a new rhythm into that. Another example of living in a robot, and the last one that I have with me is Hans Hollein's mobile office, which is a television, like a performance for the television, where Hollein would arrive at an airport with a Cessna and then plugging his bubble into an existing infrastructure that is already there, and then crawl into that and start working there. So there is a historic perspective to that that I hope that might kind of bring these heterogeneous positions together. And what I really want to ask you is, in a first round, is that how would you relate your research, your initiatives, your interests, on the one hand to a historic context, but also, and most importantly, to a situation today? How is the advancement, the acceleration of the digital media starting to kind of changing our way of living together? And I would want to start with the people from the Ice House, Christina and Jeffrey.
Testing. Test. Very good. So for the Ice House, I think the most, apart from the obvious, this is tomorrow sort of historical continuity aspect of it. I think in the hours we spent working on this, we kept bumping up against the notion of the ultra technological machine, but at the same moment we always bumped up against the primitive as the only architecture, the first architecture. It had a sort of requirement to address things that we take for granted here. When you design a museum on Earth, you know what a museum is because you've been to museums before. But when you have to design a home where the gravity is different and the atmosphere is a different pressure and a different composition, and you have zero infrastructure, zero industry, you start to think back to what is primitive and what is the core of architecture.
Yeah, I would echo that in saying that you know, much like Hans Hollein still needed to be in a bubble, actually there is a physical that we are still faced with. When you're working in this environment, you realize we do still have a body and we do still exist in space. And as much as we would like to say that we can live in a television set or in the digital realm alone, in fact, when we go back to the primitive, we still exist physically. And so do we have to strip it down to what is it essential that we still require physically versus what can be replaced by the completely unreal? Yeah.
Should we go just, Mr. Giffinger, would you?
Okay, all right. Does it work? Okay. So my relation to space has different dimensions because now it's working. Yeah. So we have different approaches to space. Yeah? This has to do with history. It comes out from this very old idea of the physical space, which goes back to Newton, etc., and geographic space. And we learned that this is not the only understanding of space. It has to do with functional relations. And so this coming to industrialization, this was very important in terms of travel time, in terms of transportation costs. And now, and we know that there is a third meaning, and this is the social space, what we are working on. Yeah, and it is since the 90s, it has become very interesting because it changed the conditions. How can we cope with a space in our urban and regional context? Because the meaning of space is changing. And because we have different instruments to overcome space, to handle space, yeah? Starting with internet. And everyone thought in this time that now we have to travel anymore. This was a nonsense. We learned it very fast that also we have new modes of exchanging information and to communicate in a certain way. But to produce knowledge, to produce human artifacts, yeah, social artifacts, we have to meet. We have to meet directly. Yeah? So, and this was one of the evidence of the 90s. And today, we are living in a digitalized world. We talk of a digital twin city, which is around us, but we cannot see it. Yeah? But everything is connected in the meantime. So this means how can we handle that, and how can we understand what is going on in the real world on the one hand side, and how is it reflected in the digitalized world? So this is our main field of research nowadays, since some years.
Just to understand you right, the digital and the real world are two different worlds, you'd say, and it's about this understanding what happens in the digital and parallel to that in the real world.
How they are influencing vice versa, no? In a mutual way.
It's about the influence between these two.
Yeah, so I'd say one of the things that struck me about that picture you put up there is like the people crawling into the house, sort of becoming one with it, which is interesting. Maybe the most relevant thing, almost a decade ago when I was doing my thesis work at MIT, we were in it was a lab that looked at sensor networks, and this was before the Internet of Things. And one of the things that interests me is how much symbiosis I saw starting to happen between the sensors and the people. So what was of interest was to make a robot, which eventually became those, to be basically an agent of the sensor network. So you can think of it now like an agent of the Internet of Things or an agent of a house. So when you're thinking of integrating yourself into that house, you're almost giving that house a personality. And I think we're going to be looking at it, at least to begin with, yeah, you're going to be living in a robot, but the real question may be when we're going to be starting to become the robot. right? When it's so integrated into who we are and what's around us that it's inseparable. I'm not even talking about like implants or anything as dramatic as that, but parts that are with us at all times or parts that are with us in our homes that we start giving other functions to, that if they were taken away from us would cause maybe a deficit in what we were doing at that time. So I think that's an interesting way to look at how this idea from the past might be going towards the future. And it's, yeah, like the past decade, I've seen that trend really sort of continue of highly integrated environments into personality and social side of things.
Jasmina?
You hear me? Huh? Is it? Okay. So first things first, I really love technology, you know, and I'm not afraid of it, and I don't think there's a difference between the things and me, you know, and I love the way it goes. Look, this was the electrical woman, you know, once. I don't want to live without technology. And today it's technology, you know. And this is I'm one of the founders of Casa Jasmina, and I won't renounce it, but I think it's very important that we, in everyday life, using technology, that we know how to hack it, because if we cannot make it, and we cannot make everything. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a designer even, but I can hack it. Like, you know, I can control it, I can control the powers of the mean of reproductions in our hands. So this is the manifesto I wrote. It's called Internet of Women Things, because I realized the domotica, the technology that we're using at home, that was designed by the big companies, that is controlled by Google, by the big companies of internet, actually do not respond to the needs of the real people who are living there. At this point, I realized that most of these designers, most of the thinkers are men. Not that I have anything against men, but that because it is a field of power and money, women are excluded, as always are in history. And women are more concerned with privacy, with political issues, and with economic issues, and the world order, which is also very important. This is a new world order we are facing now. Now, having said that, I must say that I can tell a difference, really I can tell the difference between my child, my pet, and my robot. And the moment that I lose this, that I can't tell the difference, I'm ready to leave this world. I don't believe in this thing of, you know, one day singularity will become, because after all, man is behind it, okay?
Right. Well, you know, to answer your question, maybe I can explain how I work on a project like Living with Robots. So I am a science fiction writer, but we were engaged in a Living in a Robot speculative design project. So you have a design project, you have to have a client. So our client was Amelie Klein of Vitra Design Museum. And you've got to have a designer, producer guy. So our producer was Sheldon Brown, who's an art professor at the University of California, San Diego. So, you know, why him? Well, Sheldon Brown is the director of the Arthur C. Clarke Center for the Human Imagination. And Arthur C. Clarke is a science fiction writer, much more famous than myself. And he's dead, unlike me, but he's also rich. So he left a lot of money to this foundation, which is, you know, supported on the royalties from 2001, A Space Odyssey, and Dr. Clarke's many best-selling science fiction novels. So I went and I approached Sheldon Brown and I said, look, how would you guys at your Center for Human Imagination like to work with some European design museum on the prospect of living with robots in the future? And he says, what a great idea. Why don't you just come right over and be in residence here and we'll actually work on this project. So we did that. We left Turin and Casa Jasmina and we went to the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination in glamorous San Diego, California, and we just moved right into the lab for about a month. And we worked on all kinds of prototypes, and we built robots, and we speculated about robots, and we did quadrant futurist scenarios. We did some persona studies. We did a lot of, you know, basic speculative design work, and we came up with a video, which is, you know, in the installation here. But you know, and I'm happy with the video, but I'm actually much happier with the entire robot show. I think it's one of the most effective speculative design and critical design shows that I've ever seen. It's really big. It has a very large spectrum of the top talent in Europe and the US, and I'm really happy to be associated with it. Now, I'm not a designer, I'm a writer. So I wrote an essay for the show, and I wrote a preface for it. And when I was done, I also wrote a science fiction story, which is about people living in an intelligent house. And that was basically my reward from doing it. I mean, I'm happy to participate, but what I'm really happier about is that having done this work with these various groups and people and this wide variety of talent, I now have a much more advanced sensibility about the idea of human-robot interactions in a domestic context, and better, I'm better educated about it, and I think I just have a more sophisticated grasp, so that's why I did it.
So you did that because it just came up, but at the same time, you did, starting in 2014, Casa Jasmina together with Jasmina, something that is your own initiative, and I think it's also like there it's actually, as I think that you both represent this position of an affirmative practice with technology, an affirmative approach to technology in relation to us as human beings. But could you tell a little bit more about what you're doing there and how that kind of, what's the aim for that on a broader scale?
Well, you know, it was a private project. It was actually my idea, but it was like, why don't we have a home of our own, which is different and not like the old-fashioned homes we inherit, especially we in Europe. We don't construct houses so easily, you know. And we were the beginning of Casa Jasmina was Bruce and I sleeping in a building without windows, without heating, you know, abandoned building of Fiat. Nobody was living here, with rats and pigeons, you know, but excellent internet, you know, and sleeping in, you know, in the sleeping bags and thinking, oh, look, what shall we do with this space? We can do anything. And we're surrounded in Fab Lab and Arduino people, and they're like brilliant geeks, you know, who really don't know what to do with themselves. They just make chairs and connect to things which make no sense. And since I'm like this very sensible, down-to-earth person, not that I'm stupid, you know, people who, I don't want Google to make me stupid, you know, I want to, how to say, hack Google and make it work for us, you know, for like other people. I realized that we should involve other people and live there and try to imagine the technology we want to use in everyday life. And who is using the home? This is home, for heaven's sake. It's not house. It's not science fiction. It's not only pretty, you know, in a way like Armani house of the future is. And besides, I don't even believe in future. I think that future does not flow linearly. I think future is like what I can perceive now and what we make use nowadays, what we want, something that makes us happy, that makes us more powerful, that empowers us economically. So what is also important about this house of the present, we call Casa Jasmina, the ending is now, it's already there, because it became a functional bed and breakfast. People are there, artists, normal people, tourists, and they can bring some innovations. They have their own ideas, you know, and it's a closed economic model, not a big deal. Nobody really made money, but we are in the museums, you know, and people are submitting things to us, their ideas. You know, we have design fictions, we have Internet of Women Things movement, you know. It's such a lively place, and we cook. It's a real home. It's a real house. We cook, we clean, we have little robots, and, you know, very important about robots is that they shouldn't be anthropomorphic. Children are afraid of anthropomorphic things, you know. They should be soft and nice.
So you say it's dead already, this Casa Jasmina, because of that? And was there a moment where a moment of emancipation that goes along with Casa Jasmina?
Well, we said from the beginning of the Casa Jasmina project that it would be a 2-year test project. And I think it's very important when you involve yourself in a situation like this that you go into it with a very clear head and a clear exit strategy. It's like, how do you get to stop? Okay, it's not really an experimental space because it's actually run by the Torino Fab Lab and the rest of the people in the building. And if Jasmina and I never went there again, the space would be perfectly fine. But you know, what you want to do with a thing like this, okay, I'm a novelist and a science fiction writer, but I'm also a technology journalist. And it's very important in my practice to associate myself with people who have something to lose. Like, I mean, people who have skin in the game and are actually investing their energies and their, you know, and their human needs in the situation. Like, I can easily write a story which is set on a space colony on Mars, because I have done that and even won awards for it. But it's much more important to be in a room with young people who are actually NASA contractors, who are like hanging out with NASA and actually like trying to understand how to 3D print the ice. Okay, that's much more interesting than anything that simply goes on in my imagination. That's like the grain of the material for me, right? So we did this and we did this project, but you know, we're not jealous of it. Anybody could do it. Anybody who had access to a fab lab, and there are fab labs all over Italy, could easily build a residency with maker furniture. At the end of the hall here, there's a structure in Vietnam. It's like literally a ton of maker furniture in there. Anybody in this room could find an abandoned building somewhere in Vienna, go in and start filling it up with maker furniture, just squat the place and take it over. I mean, you could punk it out, you could do it yourself. Seriously. We did it, we proved it.
Vienna is in a different situation when it comes to space, but I think there were...
No, it isn't. It's not a different situation at all. On the contrary, this is red Vienna, okay? All kinds of hell is happening.
We saw yesterday walking in Vienna many possible Casa Jasminas, you see. But it won't be Casa Jasmina, it has a different name, a local name.
We will invite you in activism here. No, but I think there were two issues. There was, of course, one, a provocation towards the people of the Ice House, but at the same time, there's this moment that I was getting interesting, is the moment of innovation. That Jasmina was also talking, that also Mr. Giffinger is kind of, I think that Casa Jasmina might stand up as a perfect example of an innovation that you would be interested in, I think.
Yeah, this reminds me very much to our approach, because I'm talking about this smart city trend, what we have worldwide in the meantime. And I know it not only in European countries, but in the US or in Latin American context as well. So, and for me, as a non-technologist, yeah, I'm geographer and regional scientist, so we are coming more from the side of the city and of society. For me, the smart city, the innovation itself is not a technology. It is what we do, how we handle technology. This makes the innovation in the city. Yeah? This is not the new devices what we are using. It is the way how we handle it and how we decide to have it. Yeah? This is the same if you design a new house for yourself, where you want to live. Yeah? We ask as urban researchers and planners, what kind of city do we want to have? And this has to be a citizen-centered approach, not a technology-centered approach. Yeah? And then to come to innovation. And this innovation is a mixture of technical and social innovation. It has to be a mixture. And here it comes coming questions of power, coming questions of value systems, of attitudes, yeah, and this leads to the question: which groups, which type of citizens are able to express their interests themselves, or how to bring in the different interests. And so what we are doing nowadays is to look for a methodology which helps us and to overcome this domination of technical innovation, in order to make it to bring it down to the neighborhood, to bring it down to the city. Yeah. Okay.
Isn't that more a problem of the discourse on technology than technology itself? Technology is always this put forward as the utopian thing.
Yeah, but we do not know what the technology of tomorrow is, so we have to think about this technological progress. We have to think from the urban side, and urban means society. This means citizens who has very different interests and even different capabilities. We have very powerful, well-educated citizens. We have less educated. We have weaker groups in the city. So it is always, and we are in different roles. We are consumer and prosumer at the same moment, and we run into conflicts as a director of a museum. And as a visitor of a museum, yeah? In the next moment you are a visitor or a consumer of anything, and sometimes you are a producer at the same time. Yeah? So this we have to discuss, because technology enables us today to control a lot of things, to monitor many things, yeah? And to develop instruments which help us to find good solutions, which are democratic solutions.
Jeffrey, I think you...
Yeah, I think those two things really encapsulate the thoughts I've been having, which is this idea of the hands-on. You know, you get your hands dirty, you make Google work for us. But I'm constantly filled with this idea that that it's not going to work for us ever. So, on the one hand, making it work for us makes you technically proficient. It makes you technically literate, which is a prerequisite. But it also brings to mind this image of a sort of Zion from the Matrix, where you're actually hunkering down lower and lower in a bunker situation where you're not disrupting Google. You're actually just becoming capable yourself so that you can hide, or you can control your immediate surroundings. But it sounds to me like a sort of submerging, subterranean almost, this idea of scared of the sky. You know, if Google and et al., Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, they're controlling the skies, right, from orbit, with solar-powered drones, whatever you want, then, forget the literal sky versus ground, but even just the tendency to want to become self-sufficient, I think, is it's something that I struggle with. I don't know what, the technical proficiency and literacy may result in a disruption or a sort of something that inadvertently strengthens Google because you end up using their work.
I don't know if this is what you mean, but there's a sense that that our tools, technology or digitization, in this case, Internet of Things, somehow control what we're doing and produce a certain result. It's the same for designers, but the tool you use guides you towards what a thing is, versus being able to control the tool, make the tool, and design the tool in the first place. Is that
the thing I'm getting from the Casa Jasmina and the vision for taking control of our technology is that we make the tools actually, or we use simple tools to make the complex tools, whatever. But it doesn't. It does alter our lives, but it does not alter somehow the ultimate vector of where technology might be heading, because it sounds like you do not have agency in the larger moves. If that makes any sense.
Could you make that more concrete, like an example from your own work, or like?
So, I suppose the infrastructures themselves might be put in place, and you have an opportunity to plug into them. But to make true infrastructure, sort of this grassroots infrastructure, grassroots infrastructure right now lives as a sort of using an existing infrastructure from the ground up, but it's still the infrastructure you do not control. So let's say the communication systems which we use to collaborate or subvert, for example, are still not ours. So I suppose the problem is that we could use technology, we could even make technology, but we don't have a grassroots infrastructure. Maybe that's...
Maybe Alex can jump into that, because I think you're you're also the one here on the podium that is doing stuff for himself, by himself. You're really kind of doing technology or aiming to understand, but also make technology for you and your ideas work.
Yeah, so I can point to one example, which is actually here in the museum. It's called the Headgasmatron. It's not the cute robots. It's the second thing. So it's this robot that uses one of those Chinese head scratchers that go like this. And for a lot of people, it tickles them, or the hairs on the back of their neck stand up. In any event, it gives them a very strong physical reaction to that feeling. So what I wanted to do with that piece of artwork was to get people to experience what it means to be intimate with a robot now, so you can have the discussion today about it, and not just read about it or see it in like a rendering, but actually come to a museum and have that feeling yourself. Because there's a difference between feeling pleasurable or weird with a robot versus thinking about it. So when you have those actual feelings, you can internalize it a bit more. I guess the point I'm trying to get to is, if sometimes by the point that the technology is out, it may be too late to start having those discussions. And there are a lot of things that are being put out there at breakneck speed without much discussion beforehand, either because they're very technical, or people don't quite grasp what's happening, or there's so much money behind it that they just want to get it out there. So that's one place where art and installation and experiences and places like this museum can fill in that void and get those discussions started before those things happen.
You want to add, Bruce?
Yeah, I think anticipating events is a thing that design fiction is ideal for. But I would like to speak up on behalf of Google, because we've had Google people in Casa Jasmina as guests, and they gave us their Google graphic design guidelines, and they were busy in there Googling and trying to spread their Google gospel. So if you get really close to Google people, and sort of walk around in their shoes, you understand they have a lot of robot housing problems. Like, it's very difficult to find a house in Silicon Valley. Even people in Google can't afford to have one. So they have to have their rent subsidized by Google. Also, the way that Google designs their workspaces is so seductive that a lot of people barely live outside Google. I mean, they eat there, they work there, they're there for, insane amounts of hours, and they have no private life outside the situation. Plus, they have to commute on the Google bus, which is, famous for being assaulted by people with rocks and so forth. So, but it goes deeper than that, because if you're into Google and you're into home automation, then you're into the Google Nest ecosystem, and you don't dare use the equivalent of, say, Amazon Echo in your home, because that's actually your worst competition. You don't want to have an Apple at-home kit if you're a member of Google's board of directors. What if Apple just starts spying on you, right? I mean, this is like competitive intelligence problems there. So, you start, once you sort of go beyond the facade of saying Google's in the sky and they can see everything, because they are in the sky and they can see everything, but they're also people, and they've actually got an immediate hands-on problem with the issues you're trying to tackle.
I think that's a wonderful comparison or opposition or binary that you're bringing up here. You have the spirit of the corporation that hovers around us, or that kind of traverses us, and then there are these people. But I think also the question for me is then the goal that is given by Google, the goal that is given by the spirit, or the corporation, or then maybe the algorithm. Like in old cybernetic terms, the goal is given, we sail to Athens. But nowadays, and in old times, there was still a captain saying, well, we sail to Athens. Nowadays, this giver of the goal has disappeared into a network of unknown captains. And that people work for Google, and so there is something there that is also, I think, tricky, huh?
Well, that's not in fact true, because Google had a very clear mission statement, which is to organize all the world's knowledge and make it useful to mankind, which was sort of there from day one. They've stumbled into the situation they are mostly because they made billions of dollars. and they found areas where people were interested in what they were doing. And then there were other things they were doing, like scanning every library book in the world that sounded like it was going to be really useful and great and would fit their mission, but in fact couldn't.
But Jasmina, you wanted to jump in.
I think we can have our own cloud, you know. We can have firewalls. We can, you know, when I think about Casa Jasmina, and I think about privacy a lot. And I think a lot about diversity, you know, because every culture, milieu has its own taste, you know, and we shouldn't interfere on that, because there will be no so-called future or success of any technology if it doesn't adapt to the local, to the people, you know, and the people differ. Even in Italy, they differ. I always use this example of coffee makers. You know, we have Lavazza in Torino, and we had an art exhibit, Share Festival, electronic art, and we had a Lavazza machine, because the Lavazza woman gave us this machine of coffee maker, and it was like a spying camera, you know. And people didn't know if it was really a Lavazza machine or if it was a camera, you know, and they had this relationship, you know. Now, this kind of artwork or this kind of device in a Casa Jasmina made in Serbia wouldn't work, because people don't use a Lavazza machine, because they like to make their own coffee in a different way, you see. So they would like not react to this kind of art, they wouldn't react to this kind of technology, they wouldn't buy it, it wouldn't be a success, not to speak of US, which likes things to be pushed on, you know, one button, because they do everything fast, you know, different ways, you know. And so I think there are different levels of thinking and about technology, about protecting ourselves from big data, and about using it. And my solution, being an activist all my life in different fields, is always to try to take them, to hack things, to understand them, and to try to make the point of it. We can't refuse things that are bigger than us, but we can try not to be invaded by them, you know. And the change that is coming, that's everywhere, we can't avoid it. I even like it, you know. Why should we change?
I think, Mr. Giffinger, I think that, again, there is something that relates to your research and your position there, that there is a local movement versus a global capturing of something, or in that field.
Yeah, of course, we have this global trend of standardization of technology, and but with an increasing capacity, which means that it can be individualized to the different lifestyles, so that all of us have the impression, or is able to use it in his own way, but within these technical conditions, what information and technology is providing us. On the other side, as a society, or as an urban society, we have to think about the use of technology as a tool. We use it according to our individual attitudes, yeah? No question. And we accept what we have today and what we will have tomorrow, yeah? But on the other side, we have to think about the use of technology as a tool, as a society, as an urban society. And this brings me to other questions, to questions of sustainability, this brings me to questions of climate change, etc. Yeah? So, and of social inclusion, because it provides new risks, but new possibilities as well. Yeah? And this is what we are working on. Which impact does technology have on urban development? And how can we use it, make it more useful for us, not on the individual level, this is not my field, but on the urban level, let's say.
Jeffrey and Christina, making use of technology, how would you kind of describe what you learned by doing the Ice House and doing it still and developing further with NASA engineers for our mundane world, for spaceship Earth? Huh?
Well, I think it comes back to this idea that there's something between designing with a tool or designing or designing the tool in the first place. So 3D printing as a tool, as a technology, is kind of out there, and we take it to its extremes. Well, with what materials? Okay, you can print in how many axes can you print? But we don't often step back and say, well, what are we trying to achieve? What are the goals, and what kind of tools do we need to actually be designing first to achieve those ends? So whether that's an urban solution or an architectural one. Actually, one of the very first meetings we had, I remember we were discussing, is it 3D printing if we, for example, evaporate water inside of a dome and allow the water to form on the inside of the surface? Is that printing? Do we have to design a new tool that prints in the way that we would like it to? And I think this is kind of more of the discussion we need to have, and designers are evolving all over, not to just be makers of places and makers of objects, but to be designers and makers of the tools themselves. And I think that's been echoed in what everybody's been saying here.
Yeah, and I can qualify the term techno-utopia a little bit more. I think for Mars Icehouse, techno-utopia was never invoked by the designers because we did not take the position that it was better than a non-techno-utopia than some other kind of utopia, but really just because it was the only option. We needed to use technology to make something for the first time on a new world. So the role of technology has always been, for us, I mean, at least for those two projects you mentioned, the Mars Ice Home and then the one with NASA that's currently happening now, is that you think from the first principles, which are physics, and then you work with engineers who have worked on techniques that could build things using tools and things that conform to the laws of physics, which is something that architects often are very bad at. Architects often prefer to put forth the impossible and then have someone tell them how they might accomplish that. For us, it was really asking what are the principles, what is the engineering, and then what is possible, and then we push, and sometimes we're surprised by what the engineers have already thought of or developed behind the scenes, because, for example, NASA is full of closets and secret rooms and things that were developed but never implemented. There was a new president came in, projects were canceled, people retired, whatever. Things were deemed infeasible at the time, so you don't often know what the tool chest has. But I wanted to also ask about, I think everyone here has a struggle with, this notion of optimization. I think that, I suppose I want to ask about efficiency and whether that's the ultimate goal, because I think that we really ignore the ultimate cost of our material production on the planet, and that's something that I can never shake. Is the idea that when we try to make things faster for ourselves, we actually offload the cost on the earth. So pushing a button for your coffee, as opposed to making it yourself, results in lots of waste, lots of energy and waste to go into the thing that allows you to just push a button. And what is the metric ultimately? Is it the human sort of empathetic engagement with robots, or are we thinking longer term? Are we thinking about material costs and absolute scarcity, in other words?
Bruce, you want to?
Well, if you could settle Mars, then you could settle every desert on Earth 100 times more cheaply and easily. And I actually think that would be a very handy thing to do, because we have a problem in the 21st century that our only frontier is the wreckage of the unsustainable. And Torino is a town that is full of the wreckage of the unsustainable because it was the hometown of Fiat, and it's the Detroit of Italy. And like Detroit, it decayed, and it's full of empty buildings. And Casa Jasmina is in one of them. So if you're doing an optimal development in Torino, you immediately think, well, can I just hollow out this dead factory and move my 3D printer in there? And in fact, that's what the Turinese do all the time. And, you know, and we're, as people who spend a lot of time in Turin, we're happy in that situation. But I think we're missing the aspect of just going across the horizon, scrapping all the rules, starting over from beginning, and, you know, and starting with a new structure for society, which is something that people used to be able to do rather commonly. And the Earth is so crowded that there's just not a good place to do that. Every place that can support human beings is pretty much settled. But, you know, there are huge areas of the planet, like the Tibetan Altiplano or the Sahara, where the techniques that are being pioneered like this might in fact prove practical. And, you know, I think
Ice in the Sahara, very practical.
Well, you know, yeah, the Sahara's got plenty of solar energy, and there's all this sand you can smelt.
There's no water, huh?
Well, there's no water, but you would recycle it. I mean, there's not a lot of water on Mars either. So, you know, if you're going to do it with 3D printed ice, I mean, I would be a happier man if I thought that our society was willing to do more things like that. I think we are, you know, in the 21st century, we're kind of stuck in our ways, and we live in the shadow of industrialism and modernism, and we're not really true to our own means and methods of arranging and producing stuff. We're still very skeuomorphic, you know? I mean, we have our robot show, but it's in the gigantic 19th century building. We don't have a building built by robots.
There are buildings being built by robots, but Christina wanted to...
No. I guess I was reacting to the we don't really actually do the things that we could do, and that image of these empty rooms at NASA filled with projects that never went anywhere. And there is a lot that we could do, and that I would like to stand in favor of the techno utopia of that we can and have always used technology to do more and better things, to imagine different futures, to create. And I think, I mean, we're here doing it, but I guess there is this pushback of, you know, why isn't it happening faster? Actually, why aren't we in the 3D printed building right now? Although it's getting there, we're starting it, but you know, yeah, why if it's supposed to be happening at what's the Moore's law rate? Why aren't we? What's going on?
But Bruce, when you speak about starting all over again, is it about an economic system that you're speaking of, or is it just the production of buildings, and what is it that you mean by that?
Well, I'd actually like to see people start over, as you know, our fellow panelists were saying, from the laws of physics. And, you know, I think that would actually be a great place to kind of start. I mean, if you're actually going to do it, if you're going to create a technological method from the very first thing, why don't you start over from like basic research instead of working within all these skeuomorphic structures? Now, you know, if there's a place where a thing like that is happening, it's probably Dubai. I mean, Dubai is a place where they actually do 3D print buildings, but they've got a lot of spare capital, and they're an autocratic petro state. But if they could free themselves from petro state, which they're trying to do, and they were like a solar-powered autocracy, which is what they are, they might do really astonishing things. I mean, you know, we spent a lot of time in Italy, all right, and we know a lot of very well-educated and very creative Italian architects. But to be an Italian architect is to live under really the curse of the UNESCO World Heritage buildings. They're just all over the place. And if you're a young, ambitious Italian architect, you're basically refitting your mother's bathroom until you're 70, right? I mean, you never get to build a mile-high structure like Frank Lloyd Wright wanted to have. You're like, there's literally no room for it. But there's plenty of room on the planet, and there's plenty of techniques that we could use to do things that are absolutely unheard of. And we've even got billions of dollars. Like Apple's headquarters, which is, by the way, the mausoleum for Moore's Law. If you've seen Apple's new headquarters, which is one of the most expensive buildings on the planet, you know, it's a gigantic flying saucer. You know, every doorknob is like designed from first principles. Okay, they've still got unbelievable amounts of cash in the bank. I mean, they're close to $1 trillion in capital at Apple. They could easily build 10 Dubais with that amount of money. They just don't have the motive or the imagination or the political will or the vision to do it.
But Italy also, it's very true what Bruce said about that. Architects has no job, nobody has a job but living with your grandma, not even your mom. And it had one of the biggest maker fairs in Rome. It was colossal, because who came out was these young people who have no jobs, no opportunities, nothing. But they have creative ideas, and they're happy about it. They came like kids, and everybody was presenting their works. It's the biggest maker fair in Europe. And what's very interesting is it's not like the American one. The American one is like a Burning Man, like a circus. It's, you know, it's like fancy and like this flashy and everything. These people here are just building stuff in their own basement and doing stuff which they can use, because also they have, no, like, to buy a new nice kitchen, everything is pretty and expensive in Italy, you know. You need 20,000 euros, but to make one with an open source and also personalize it so it's not an IKEA, you know, it doesn't take much. Even I could do it, you know, really, but I don't need to do it, but my daughter does need to do it. So I mean, this, Italy is also very good for this kind of stuff, because they have a big tradition of artigianato, meaning, you know, craftsmen. People, crafts, you know. So basically we did in Casa Jasmina a little course of how they learn IoT. For the first time, the architects saw these, never heard of it, you know. But once they learn a little bit about it, they could think really fast and really good and really nice, you know. And I see the future there, really.
Alex, is computation becoming, or working with robots becoming a new handicraft?
What do you mean by handicraft?
Artisan way of, like, in former times building a furniture.
Yeah, I guess the difference now, there's a few things that are different. So if you were to build a chair from a tree, you could completely understand that entire process and ecosystem in your mind. To design a robot, like, you can understand computer programming, or so, but you're not going to understand lithium-ion chemistry or microcontroller lithography, or like every single piece of what goes on in that machine. So I'd say that's what the difference is. It's the abstraction layers that are built in, necessarily because of the complexity of those devices. So then the question is, you know, if you can't, like, take sand and build it into something that's a computer, like, where do those lines blur? Does that matter? Does that not matter? Like, say an Arduino, that's based off an Atmel chip, which now Microchip bought, so Microchip now has Microchip and Atmel, like the biggest microcontroller company. They're like the Google of microcontrollers, which are like little computers. So even if you're using this little open source board, you still can't 100% completely understand what's happening entirely with it. You can mold it to what you want, but if Atmel chose to hide something in that chip, a little bit of code or something, you have no way of knowing. So artisanal, like a chair, yes, you can literally chop down a tree and make a chair. Like, if you put enough time and effort, anyone can learn that. To build something like a robot, there are so many abstracted layers that it's quite different. And I think there's a lot of interesting questions around what that means or makes a difference for.
I would absolutely add that we have had to work much more interdisciplinary, I think, than ever before. I think this idea of the master builder is gone, and maybe we have to work collectively as sort of like hive mind now. There are so many specialists that we need to collaborate with. So much deep knowledge, and so much deep knowledge in diverse areas that are their own silos that need to come together to make in this era. you know, work on a plant wall, and we need biologists, we need people who are specialized in photosynthesis, we need people who are specialized in hydroponic, aquaponic culture, we need people who are specialized in mold, we need people who are specialized in the HVAC system that makes the plants, people are specialized in lighting, and all of this has to come together in a project. And I think generally this idea that there may not be one person who can design something anymore, that there may be a need for this hive networked group of super specialists.
But maybe this is the a moment why we cannot start from scratch all over again, huh? Because we have so many specialists that need to team up, need to find a solution in a process, that they have to agree on one solution, so that there is no radicality any longer in that. Bruce.
Well, you know, this is kind of a literary problem, because the most famous novels about trying this are Robinson Crusoe and Jules Verne's Mysterious Island, which is about people who are shipwrecked and have nothing, and literally have to like try to rebuild civilization from trees. So, you know, Robinson Crusoe is famous as a work that people who really suffer like a lot. I mean, Robinson Crusoe is a book that's read in hospitals and prisons. But Mysterious Island, the castaways in this book actually succeed in building a civilization. I mean, they're all technicians and engineers and designers, and they happen to have nothing, but they sort of start with sand, and by the end of the book, they've got like a railroad, you know, and their own forge and the rest of it. So I'm not, you know, I like the idea of starting from scratch with science, but, you know, science is a very elaborate structure too, and nobody knows all of science. Nobody's ever going to know all of physics, all of chemistry, all of, you know, computation, or all of the rest of us, and nobody's afraid of that. I mean, people don't understand language. I wouldn't say that you should start with no words, but who knows how words work, or what words work, or why a poem moves us or another poem doesn't move us. And people don't understand their wife or their child. You know, I mean, you have like, the next generation is going to be a mystery to you. Even if you build a utopia from scratch, I would guarantee you that a teenager who you saw in the cradle is still going to behave in a very mysterious way.
I think I love the example of Robinson Crusoe, because Robinson Crusoe is a story where Crusoe is actually rebuilding the society that he knows. Yeah? Versus there is a Crusoe narration by a French author where Crusoe gets nuts, yeah? and not reproduces the same ideology, you know, that he has inherited and that he knows. And I think that there is a moment when we speak about starting from scratch that is not about physics, not about materials, but it's really the way how we want to live together. And I think that's the question that isn't solved in Dubai and cannot be solved by settling the Mars.
Well, you know, I have to speak up for Dubai here. Because as a futurist, I follow what they're doing, and they're doing some very strange stuff, like the Dubai Happiness Project is one of the weirdest political things I've ever seen. I mean, I don't know if that's going to work at all, but it's really novel and peculiar. And it's all about reducing the suffering of the population. It's like, why aren't you more pleased with yourselves, right? Yeah. You know, and how can we like measure the suffering of the population so that you're not like throwing yourself off buildings or becoming a terrorist? I mean, how can we reduce your alienation? How can we, you know, get you to engage more? How can we just like make you happier? I mean, what is your happiness? You know, and they're like really anxious about this in Dubai, and they go on about it to just, you know, an astonishing extent. Okay, you know, if you start over with nothing, and you start over absolutely from scratch, that's a condition of bare life, as Giorgio Agamben calls it. It's absolute moral suffering. You're deprived of everything. I mean, Robinson Crusoe is poised on the edge of madness. That's why his experience makes sense in a literary way to people who really suffer. You know, if you're in the insane asylum, if you're poised at the end of death, reading Robinson Crusoe actually cheers you up. You know, and the success of the book is that, okay, first he meets Friday, which is another human being, and he has some kind of relationship with another person. He doesn't suffer the stark agony of absolute independence from everybody else. And then at the end, he's rescued. He gets to go back to England and tell his story of adventure and be the famous Robinson Crusoe who survived this great ordeal. All right, it's a great book, but it's just a book. It's not a civilization or a city. I'd like to see a civilization or a city that was actually built by people who were urban and sort of knew what they were trying to do. And I don't think it's beyond our capacity, because new cities do get built.
Alex, you wanted to jump in just a second before.
No, I just wanted to quickly add something. There was an artist who tried to make a toaster from the forest.
Thomas.
Yeah. It's a great thing to look
that
up.
guy? Yeah, he's interesting.
Yeah.
Royal College of Art.
Yeah. That's all. So it was someone trying to build a toaster from nothing, and then sort of his journey through that process. Just interesting.
To say, since I went through wars and sanctions for many years in Serbia, you know, in ex-Yugoslavia, there's so many things we don't need once they collapse. You know, we lived without electricity, without medicines. At the beginning, it was terrible. You know, I thought I was going to die because I was missing it in my head. But all of a sudden, you realize that you can live without many things that you think you cannot live without, you know, and then you start making up things you really need. And then what really becomes important is the solidarity, people. This is what really matters at this point. So I think this building from a scratch, you know, building from disaster can be a really happy moment, you know. I've never lived a better moment between my people, my friends, my family than during the dire straits of my country, you know, because we had to share, we had to think, we had much better social life, you know, and love, you know. Sorry, I must say the word.
So the moment you opened up Casa Jasmina was a happy moment for you? The opening of Casa Jasmina was a happy moment for you. Yes. Yeah. Time moves on, and I think I wanted to open up the discussion to the audience. And
thank you. My question is addressed primarily to Bruce and Jasmina and also Alex. The question is, does living in a robot necessarily make us part of a transhuman agenda, an agenda promoted by most of the billionaires of Silicon Valley and elsewhere? Is there something wrong about being transhuman?
Yeah, okay, well, I'll tackle that because I'm one of the problems there. You know, I wrote a science fiction novel in which people in a future environment routinely refer to themselves as being post-human. And they're actually looking to destroy the human condition and start over with some other method of living. And they do very radical things to themselves with cybernetics and genetics and the rest of this. And yeah, it became a sexy idea. And there are a lot of people in Silicon Valley who quite like that idea. And you know, it has elements of like, I don't know, Soviet suprematism, cosmism. There's a lot of fascist ideology that's all about being superhuman, and a kind of Nietzschean ideology of, you know, mankind is a rope between the ape and the angel, and, you know, we need to like reach our angelhood and deny our apehood and so forth. Okay, these are ambitions, they're metaphysical ambitions, right? And they have very deep roots. If you look into most religions as they exist, they believe we're post-human. I mean, Catholicism believes that most of our existence is posthumous. We're alive for a little while, and then we're angels for eternity in that religion. Okay, that's not that weird an idea, right? The methods of doing it are going to be very problematic. But my personal feeling is that, yeah, by the end of this century, if civilization continues, probably we will have broken most of the aging problems that exist in the human body. There seem to be about 6 or 7 ways that people grow old. I think that if people live to be 200 or 300 years old, we would probably call ourselves transhuman. And I don't think that's a bad ambition to have. I personally would be quite happy to live to be 300. I don't think I'd ever be bored. There'd be a ton of stuff to see. I'd be very engaged in the passage of history. I don't think it's morally objectionable. It's more a question of like how it's done. And you know, it's an ethical and moral issue. And you know, living and dying is always like that.
I would take a slightly different, maybe, take on it and say that technology is human. So it's not something that has occurred in nature naturally. We have evolved along with technology. You can think all the way back to the first caveman using a club to get more protein, therefore less time spent hunting, therefore more time spent philosophizing, therefore maybe leading to things like science being invented. The other way you can look at it is like, if you view our relationship with technology as wrong, and we shouldn't be doing things like having relationships with machines, then I would also point to the thing like the poodle, because there's no wild poodles roving around. They are genetically engineered to be our companions. We took wolves over millennia and turned them into these basically biological machines in a very scientific, technologically minded method. So we right now would think it's ridiculous to think, yeah, having having some sort of feelings for a dog is wrong, or being connected to a dog in a natural way is wrong. Then try to apply some of that reasoning to technology and how technology has allowed us to maybe evolve in different ways.
Just a little thing, I have a problem with transhuman and evolving technology because of the division between poor and rich, you know, and I don't think it's going to go that easy. Some people will do it and some will stay forever young and die.
I have a question about, for the whole panel, a question about technology as a tool. We had an interesting discussion at the Ars Electronica Festival after a talk given by a young specialist of deep learning. He referred to cognitive theorists and historians of linguistic. They have shown that even simple tools have changed languages and how people think. In general, tools have changed society's worldviews. And subsequently, if we think about deep learning or machine learning, these are not simple tools anymore. We are not using deep learning. They are influencing in incredible ways our entire lives. A cell phone is not a tool anymore. It's become a part of our lives. So our notion of technology that can be used for humanity according to our social values or the way we want society to develop has to be rethinked or reimagined, I think, because technology has an incredible influence on our value system as well. So that's a very tricky thing, I think, when you think about how cities will be changing in the future by technology. I think we have to consider, we have to see it as a co-evolution of society and technology. It's inextricably connected with each other. But maybe you have a comment on that.
And I think we spoke a lot about being able to control our tools, to design our tools, and the necessary technological literacy that requires, and sort of a shift in education towards how to make the tools. And I think we do have to sort of get a grip on it. We have to not just go with how things are evolving sort of piece by piece all around us, but we have to have an awareness, and that's quite difficult to achieve. I mean, I don't have the awareness of how the 3D printer in our proposal really works. We worked with engineers to do that, and do I need to understand, or does someone else need to understand on my behalf, is another good question. But I think it's sort of learning to control and design the tool is something is very important for the next step of design, for sure.
I guess something that might be related is I did this artwork called All Prior Art, and the idea was that when we move things like deep learning into our everyday lives and into things like law, we encounter things that were built for humans that these machines are now using. So in that project, the idea was that in the patent system, if you publish an idea, that idea no longer becomes patentable. So the inherent assumption made in that law was that you can't publish a ton of ideas because you only have so many hours in the day because you're a human. But a computer could learn patents and then publish ideas at an astonishing rate and publish them online for free. So that's what I built on a little server in my closet and had them go to archive.org and put them on Google. At the end of the day, it's legally tenuous if it's going to work, but again, it was just me in a room versus if a real company like Google wanted to flood the patent system with prior art to keep their competitors from patenting things. They've now used systems like deep learning and like recurrent neural networks and things of that sort to learn things and do that and take advantage of laws written for humans. So you can also look at it from the side of not knowing how the tools work or where they're going to go actually might butt up into things that were meant for humanity. When algorithms start acting like humans, but faster, quicker, better, or smarter, in these places where they can make money, then we're going to see people who are motivated take advantage of those sort of tools in that sort of way. So we're going to be, I think we're going to be blindsided with some of these things that we haven't even seen that would have monetary advantage for people to take it. Take away.
And I think that the genius of Karl Čapek, and the reason why we still talk about robots 80 years later, is that a robot is a tool that's dressed up like a human being on stage, right? I mean, he can talk like a person that has an arm, 2 legs, and behaves like a person, but there's no human being there. It's just a technological actor, really, you know, an actor in fancy dress. And, you know, somehow that sees the public imagination. But in other ways, it gets in our way because you make these strict divisions between the robot who looks like a person but is an algorithm, can do all these other things. It puts you into this kind of theatrical situation, which is, you know, all about drama and tragedy and so forth, and gets you away from the nitty-gritty of what's going on. Like, if you say, will the robot kill us? Well, you know, at the end of Čapek's play, the original play, R.U.R., yeah, the robots wipe out humanity. They kill every last one of us. You know, and then they go on to form a different order, which is, you know, based on their ideas. But if you ask yourself, what robots are presently killing us? Well, then you immediately get into the idea of like targeted drones and targeted assassinations, which kill people every day, right? I mean, they're unmanned machines that like spy on people, watch them, and blow them out of the sky, bug crushers. They're bug splatted, right? Now, once you actually start going into that, sort of asking like very deliberate political and economic questions like, okay, where exactly does a Predator aircraft come from? And who makes the decisions to bug splat some guy on the ground in Syria? And what particular groups in Syria are getting bug splatted by Predator missiles? And who's building competitors to Predator missiles? Are the Chinese building them? Why, yes. Do the Europeans have some? Why, yeah. Do the Russians have a lot of them? Heck, yeah. Are makers making them out of 3D printed bits of cardboard? Why, yes, they are. Are they, in fact, spread all over the place? We have like a complete stack of drones that kind of goes from one thing to the other? All right, yes, we do. And they're all real things. You could talk to the people who are making them. You don't have to go to the Čapek play anymore. You don't have to make metaphysical distinctions. On the contrary, you can go to the area where it bleeds and, you know, and become morally engaged with what's really going on, and you'll come up with a much better sensibility about the situation. And not only that, you'll even understand the future better than you will if you start over with Čapek's Parable from 80 years ago. I mean, he was a great dramatist. He wrote other great dramas. I have visited Karl Čapek's grave. I know a lot about him. He's one of my spiritual ancestors, but that was then and this is now.
Are there more questions from the audience? No questions? I think that was a great. I think it was a great ending, actually. Thanks a lot for you to participate here and discuss with us. Thanks a lot to the audience to stay calm and try to concentrate and try to get what we are discussing here on the podium despite this fantastic acoustics in this room, I have headache after a long day here in the MAK. Actually, in the morning already having some other stuff doing here. So thanks a lot. Enjoy the exhibitions. The evening, I think the whole MAK is open today until 10, and come back very often. Thanks a lot.